Hello and welcome back to the Profit Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Matt Robinson. I am flying solo today. We are going to see out the end of our mini-series on reviews, and we're going to follow this up with some coaches' notes next week and questions and things that we've been asked along the way. And today we're going to tie everything together. We're going to take a little look back at what we've covered in the previous two episodes, just to refresh everyone's memory on those things. And then I'm going to unpick a few different ways you might use reviews in your business, what different reviews might look like, and how you can maybe suit them to your different models and different ways of running your business. So we've given you a big blueprint in last episode, but I don't want you to think that it's that or nothing. There are different ways you can use these reviews. There are different things you can do. And if what we went through last week sounds a bit big and a bit scary for you right now, today's episode should give you some different ideas and different ways of using reviews within your business. So let's dive into the episode and unpack today's topic. So just to recap, in episode 1 of this mini-series, we looked at the importance of doing reviews within your business. And mainly this boiled down to 3 key things: improving client results, improving client retention, and improving your ability to ask for referrals in your business. So those were 3 core bits that massively impact your client experience and your business results as a trainer and a coach, that really underpin the key reasons as to why you should be doing these reviews. Obviously, they're important for a number of reasons. There are loads of things we can list as to why they're important, but ultimately it boils down to those 3 core areas that we see trainers and their clients getting the biggest benefit from. So hopefully in hearing that, you really started to buy into the idea of doing reviews. And then in the second episode, we talked through the exact steps of running a full review process that you would do with someone in person. So this would be your typical in-person, one-to-one client in a gym or wherever it is, and taking them through this process every sort of 6 to 8 weeks, where you redo all of their metrics, you ask them a series of questions, you get feedback, and you have a conversation around their journey so far, what's going well, what maybe needs improving, what their next steps look like. And it gives you a really, really good base for continuing that relationship with that client and making sure that they still feel valued, that they're still motivated to keep pushing forwards, and that we acknowledge the fact that that person might have changed from when we first started working with them, even if that was only a short time ago. What they want might have changed, what they've learned about what their experience of fitness wants to be might have changed. And they might just have got a much better understanding of what's important to them now versus what they thought was important when they came through the door. So that full review process is what we would consider the gold standard. That's the thing that we believe all in-person trainers and online trainers to some degree as well, it might be done slightly differently, but everyone should be aiming to include a version of that somewhere in their business. However, we understand that people are working from different places. We're working remotely now. We work in gyms, out of gyms, online, wherever you can train people and wherever people can access fitness. We're using apps, we're using videos, we're doing all sorts these days that we weren't many years ago. And there are lots of different ways that you can carry out a review. And if you're a newer trainer, the idea of that full review might sound a little bit daunting. I would still push you to give it a go because it makes a huge impact. But today we wanted to share with you some of the different types of reviews that you can do with your clients and some of the different formats that those reviews might come in. So for some of you, these might be better for your business than what we went through last time. For others, they might just offer you that easier way into doing reviews with clients, or having a way of reviewing clients that haven't yet bought into the idea of doing a full sit-down session where they review everything they're doing with you, because some clients might push back against that initially. So that's where we're up to so far in this series. Let's now take a look at a few different things and a few different modalities you can consider when it comes to running reviews within your business. Right, so I've got 5 alternative methods of reviews or different things to consider around reviews that you might look at aside from doing a full review session. So we're going to unpack these one by one, spend a small amount of time on each and discuss where it might fit in. So the first one I'm going to mention is one you're probably all most familiar with, which is the idea of some sort of weekly check-in. This became popular when people started doing online training, and it's now seeped into the in-person training side of things as well, whereby even if you're seeing a client face-to-face, they still produce some sort of weekly check-in process if it's suitable for their needs and their goals and the level of accountability that they want. And how you do that can vary. It might be that you've got a pre-made Google form that someone fills out. It might be that there is an app that you use that they can fill in and they get a prompt on a weekly basis. It might be an email that you send to them with something to fill in. There are lots of different ways you can do this, and there are lots of different metrics you can track doing that as well. You can ask people to fill in their weight and their measurements. You can ask people for things like their calorie targets, whether they've hit those or not. You can share that with them through apps and stuff like that. We can also get any data around activity levels, so any training sessions they've completed, weekly step counts, all of those types of things can be checked on a weekly basis if required and if it's suitable for the person's goal. So that's the first thing that you can do within your business if you feel it's necessary and if it's suitable for the client. What I would say on this one is that I have found personally, and I think a lot of trainers would agree with this, that this tends to be more suitable for the people that are wanting a body composition goal and want to go all in. They want that feedback all of the time, and they want a lot of support and accountability along the way. So from my personal experience with this, in running the Big Day Body Plan, which is a bridal program that I've ran for several years, this type of format has worked extremely well within that business, because quite often brides are coming to work with me with that sort of immediate goal of wanting to get in shape for their wedding. So they've got this hard deadline in place, which means that we need a lot of feedback as quickly as possible. We need to collect a lot of data. We need to make tweaks on the go, and we need to get that done straight away. If your client is much newer to health and fitness and maybe is doing this for just some sort of health reasons, or wants to overcome some injuries or pain or aches or things like that, might not be necessary to use something like this with them initially or at all. And if you do use this, it might be that you only get them to submit one metric initially, or you get them just to track one habit initially. So it's up to you how you do it. But weekly check-ins is definitely something that can work very well within your business, both online and offline. The next type of review I wanted to discuss, which I think is often overlooked in our industry, is some sort of ongoing fitness testing. Now, a lot of clients will come to us for the purposes of losing weight, getting fitter, getting stronger, feeling healthier, feeling happier, all of those things. And quite often, if a client stays with us long enough, they start to get some more performance-related goals within their sort of remit. There's things that they want to do outside of just tracking weight and things like that. And even if a client wants to, just do fitness with you for the purposes of living a healthier, happier life, cardiovascular fitness should be part of that. Having an improved cardiovascular system should be something that everyone's striving towards, because when you look at correlations between health markers and longevity of life and things like that, one of the only markers that's got any sort of correlation is cardiovascular output, okay? VO2 max, things like that. These are associated with living longer. And if people want to live longer, it's something that they should maybe be a bit more aware of. So you could do this as part of a full review session if you wanted to. You could make that one of the things that you do. You could do someone's circumferences and weights and stuff like that. You might do fitness testing as part of that full review process, or it might be something that you do completely separately. This is something I've done with plenty of clients that are training towards 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, marathons, or, as I mentioned a moment ago, just have an interest in seeing their cardiovascular fitness improve over time as a marker of performance and improved performance. This becomes especially useful for clients that initially came for maybe a body composition goal and then have learned along the way that there are other things that are important to them, but still want something to track that's a measure of progress. So some of your clients might genuinely reach a point where they don't care what they weigh anymore. They don't care what the number is on the scales. They don't care what the tape measure says. They know themselves whether or not they look and feel good and whether or not they're doing the right things. They've got those underlying habits and behaviors now, but they still want to push themselves in some way. So how are you going to monitor that? How are you going to assess that? And this is where I think fitness testing can become very useful. Alongside this one, under the same heading, I'm going to include any sort of ongoing health testing that you might do. So there are some PTs out there, some of which I work with personally, that do a really good job of reviewing health markers on an ongoing basis. So this might be things like resting heart rate. This might be blood pressure, if that's something that you can do. It might be any sort of body fat testing and stuff like that. So aside from the general metrics that you might cover with someone, I do believe that there's a separate set of metrics that you could review with someone on an ongoing basis. And that might act as a different way of reviewing that person, especially if they're not fully bought into the full review process that you would like to do, or they've sort of already been on a bit of a journey and they need a different way of tracking their progress moving forwards. So this is the second thing that I think you could be using within your business. Next on the list follows on nicely from that fitness testing and that health testing approach that you might take. And this one is reassessing any movement analysis that you did during your client's initial sessions with you. So during their onboarding process, if you did any sort of movement assessment or movement screening, a great way to review your clients is to actually retake all of those tests once they've been training with you, maybe 3 months, 4 months, however long you want it to be, and using that as a way of reviewing their progress and showing them how much things have changed. You might be able to show them how their posture is now different, how their range of motion is so much better, how their flexibility is improved, how they can now squat so much lower than they could before, how their hip hinge is now actually working properly and allows them to not put too much load through their lower back. There are lots of things that you did in those early assessments that gave you lots of data initially to understand where to start with your client. And by reviewing those again, you can show the client how the interventions have improved that person and what that now means for their ability within the gym and within health and fitness. So again, I think this is something that is often overlooked as a method of reviewing your client or a method of underlining progress that's been made. We can often fixate over weight loss, losing clothes sizes, losing centimeters and things like that. Sometimes we need to look back at, well, where was this person when they first started? What could they do? What couldn't they do? What are they capable of doing now? So I've used reassessments of movement analysis as a great tool for marking progress and showing a client how far they've come, especially if they've made progress in this area and maybe not necessarily on the scales or anything yet. It's a great way to underline that they've still made progress. It's just that in a slightly different way so far. What you can then do with that is paint the picture of where that person could be in another 3 months' time or another 6 months' time, now that they're moving better and able to do more, and how much easier that should make their journey moving forwards. Because if someone can now move better and have better quality of movement in their day-to-day life, they're much less likely to get injured, they're much less likely to pick up aches and pains, and it should make their ability to increase workloads and capacity for workloads much simpler, which means that they should get better results in the long term. So that's another method of reviewing and performance reviewing that you should potentially consider within your fitness business. Method number 4 for running a review is one that can be used for people that are running a semi-private business, so if you're running small groups, and this can also work for if you're only seeing a client once a week, or you've got a client that isn't fully bought into that review process, as we've mentioned before. And this is the idea of doing a mini review. So me and Paul mentioned this within the last episode. We talked about how you could use that first chunk of questions as a mini review in and of itself. You could use those questions, you could do the metrics, and then you could end it there. It would probably take you about 20 minutes. So that works really well for if you're only seeing a person once a week, you could use the first 20 minutes of their session to do that review, and then still do 40 minutes of good quality exercise. You might even do some fitness testing within that so that they feel like they've done a lot of work, but again, you've gathered more data. So that's one way you could use it. In a semi-private format, you could use it to review 2 or 3 people within the hour. And this is something that I used to do regularly with my clients in the gym. Is if I was training a group of 3 people, I would set myself up in an assessment room. And as we got towards the end of a training block, my clients knew what they were doing with their exercise. So I would set up the exercise session, 2 people would be running through it, I would be reviewing the other person, and then we would cycle through that every 20 minutes. So every 20 minutes, we would change who was with me and who was exercising. So every person in the group within that 1 hour got 40 minutes of exercise and got 20 minutes to do a review with me and have a bit of one-to-one time. That works really, really well if you're organized and have got clients that, again, can buy into that process. The other time that this would work well is if you've got a one-to-one client that maybe doesn't see the value in using up a full session to do a review, but you obviously want to make sure that they're making progress and things like that. So this mini review format might work well for that. But for those of you who want to dip your toe into the semi-private side of things, that's where I think this type of format might have really, really big impact on your business. Because if you can still give people that element of one-to-one time as part of your sessions, and if you can empower people to work through a session themselves with their partner or their teammates, it's ticking a lot of boxes along the way. You still feel like you're doing a great job with each individual client. They still feel like they've got some one-to-one time with you. They're feeling confident enough with their own training that they can run through the session themselves, and you're still there to give a bit of input if it's needed. There's a lot going on there, and a lot of it is very, very positive. I think sometimes it'd be easy to look at that as a trainer and go, oh, well, if my clients know how to run the sessions themselves, then they don't need me. And that's not the case at all. It's them only knowing how to do that because you've got them to that point, and they then know that they're only doing that as a one-off session, and next week you start in the next phase of training and everything changes again. So have a think about that as a potential option, because I think that for some of you that's a really good option. And if you've only got those clients that see you once a week and stuff like that, again, it's another way of introducing reviews without taking up the full session slot. This brings us on to our 5th and final method of reviewing our clients. And again, I think this is one that just doesn't get mentioned often enough. I think trainers actually do this. They probably don't realize they're doing it. But when they realize that it's an option, I'm hoping that they can start to make use of it a little bit better. And this is the idea that you can be reviewing your clients every time you see them. So every time your client walks in the door, having a little look at their body language, what do they look like today? Do they look like they've got good energy levels? Do they look like they've slept well? Do they look like they're ready for today's session? Or do they look worn out? Do they look stressed? Do they look like they've got the weight of the world on the shoulders? Then during your session, asking them questions, exploring how things are going with them at this moment in time, noticing whether or not they've got a smile on their face in between their sets. Are they happy with how the session's going? Do they look like they're having a good time? Do they look like the mind is elsewhere? I think that we can all do a better job of using that 1, 2, or 3 hours a week that we might have with a client, just to be constantly reviewing them and giving feedback, collecting information, and using that to build a better pathway for that client to progress with. You can also use your sessions for monitoring progress within the session. So if someone has hit a PB that day, obviously you can mention it. That's a form of reviewing progress during a session. You might notice that the way they picked something up or the way they performed a movement was much better than they had done previously. So you might even film them doing that exercise and then show them some of the original footage that you took from when they did their movement assessment several months ago. It's almost like a mini review there and then in the session. And it's a nice little win. It's a nice little tick in the box that reminds them that they are making progress. Even if they haven't seen it day to day, there is progress being made. The other thing that we might use our day-to-day interactions with clients for are for reviewing things like any sort of habit tracking that we're doing at that moment in time, or any nutritional interventions that we're making. It's not always a case that we should wait until the next review to start asking about these things. We should be asking about these things on an ongoing basis. We should also be asking things like, how do you want to feel when you leave today? Is there anything that I can help you out with today? How are you finding things with your training at the moment? Is there anything ongoing with your nutrition that you might like some help with? So there are lots of different things that we can do daily to help our clients and keep them on track. They might not always need something, but it's always nice to know that they've been asked. And what that does is make it very clear that if ever they do need your help and they do need your input, you are open to being asked, because you're always asking them. So even if that client always says, no, I'm fine, yes, everything's good, I'm fine, thank you, still keep trying and always be there, always be offering that help, because it just shows that that door is always open for them to ask you any questions. I've got plenty of clients that have trained with me a long time who ask very little of me, but I will always make a point at the end of our sessions to say to them, I'll see you next week. If you need anything in the meantime, please let me know. And I will always make a point of saying that at the end of the session, because I just like to remind that person, even if it's just subconsciously, that my door is always open if they need some help from me, or if they've got a question they want to ask. I don't want them feeling like they've got to go and ask Dr. Google everything. They can come and ask me instead and get some trusted input from someone. So that's the final type of review that I think people can be thinking about. And again, it's not an official review or anything like that, but just acknowledging that the time we already spend with our clients is a great opportunity to pick up on things, to notice those wins, to maybe notice when people need a bit of extra help or an arm around the shoulder, when we might need to intervene with a bit of coaching. There are lots of things that we can do during our sessions. And it's not just about having our tunnel vision goggles on and going, right, we've got a training plan to do, let's go, let's warm up, let's do our A's, let's do our B's, let's do our C's, let's cool down, let's go home. There's more to it than that if we make use of that time. So that's our fifth and final one. Hope that's something that you can start to think about and use a bit more regularly in your day-to-day service. To finish off with, let's have a quick look back at the 5 that we've covered today. Right then, so the 5 different types of reviews that we've discussed today, other than that full review process that me and Paul went through last week, are weekly check-ins. So having some sort of automated or semi-automated way of checking in with your clients each week. We then talked about some ongoing fitness testing or health testing that you might do, where we're looking at improvements in cardiovascular performance through some sort of repeatable fitness test, or looking at some improvement in health markers through repeatable health tests like blood pressure and things like that, resting heart rate, these types of things. So that was the second one. We also looked at reassessing any movement screenings and movement analysis that we did early on in that client's journey, and using that as a marker of progress and showing the client what impact that's now having on their body. The fourth thing we looked at was doing some sort of mini review that might fit into any group settings, like your semi-private type of business, or your clients that you only see once a week, or your clients that haven't yet bought into a full review. So that one there, that mini review, fits into a lot of different types of clients in different settings. And then the final thing I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago was this idea of reviewing your clients every time you see them. I really do want to hammer that one home because I do think it's something that we can all do a better job of. We can all take a bit of extra time and attention to notice how our clients are and what's going on with them, even just how they're moving one day. If your client normally moves really well and today they're not, like, see what's going on. Like, maybe ask a question, maybe ask them how they're feeling. Is everything okay? Are you feeling any tightness anywhere? You will notice a lot of things subconsciously. We just want to bring them a little higher up into your consciousness so that you notice these things and make better use of them. So that's all for today's episode. We're going to tie up this mini series next week with a short episode on coaches' questions, coaches' notes, things like that. Anything that's been asked during the last month or so, we're going to bring that to the table. Some of it might be related to the content we've covered in this mini series. Some of it will be completely unrelated to that. So check into that episode to listen in on what the latest questions myself and Paul have been asked. And I will be answering those for you in a way that allows everyone to benefit from the answers. Until next time, take care. Make sure you're subscribing to the show if you haven't done so already, and we will catch you again very soon.